"Don't touch my father," whispered the boy by sunrise. 400 Apache warriors surrounded the ranch. The ranch stood alone at the edge of a wide valley where the dry wind moved slowly through tall grass and scattered rocks. It was not the biggest ranch in the region, and it was not the richest, but it was strong in its own quiet way. Wooden fences stretched across the land like lines drawn by careful hands, and a small house rested near a water well that had supported the ranch for many years. The man who lived there was known simply as a hardworking rancher. He woke before sunrise every day, moving with steady purpose. His life had not been easy. Years earlier, he had lost his wife to illness, and since then he had raised his young son alone. The boy had learned quickly that their world required strength, patience, and kindness. People in nearby towns described the rancher as calm and fair. He did not speak loudly or seek attention, but his actions earned respect. Travelers passing through the area sometimes stopped at his well for water, and he never turned anyone away. Among those travelers were Apache traders who crossed the land peacefully. The rancher treated them the same as anyone else, offering water or simple conversation without fear or judgment. The boy watched everything carefully. He was young but observant, learning from his father's quiet example. When Apache riders passed near the ranch, the boy felt curious rather than afraid. His father never spoke badly about them. Instead, he said that people who respect each other could live side by side, even if they came from different worlds. Life moved in steady rhythms. Mornings were filled with chores, feeding animals, repairing fences, checking the water levels. Evenings brought long shadows and moments of rest near the fire. Sometimes the boy asked questions about the past, about the land, and about the people who lived beyond the hills. The father answered simply, always choosing words that built understanding rather than fear. One afternoon, everything began to change. Dust rose along the distant road, and a group of unfamiliar riders approached the nearby town. Their arrival stirred attention because they did not look like travelers seeking rest. Their movements were sharp, their voices loud, and their eyes scanned the land as if measuring it. Within days, rumors spread that these men wanted control of several ranches in the valley. They spoke about progress and expansion, but many felt uneasy about their intentions. The rancher heard the stories but did not react quickly. He focused on his work and on protecting his son from worry. However, he noticed that conversations in town grew tense. Some people avoided him, whispering quietly after he passed. Others warned him that the newcomers had asked about his land specifically. One evening, while the sky turned orange with sunset, the rancher repaired a broken section of fence near the edge of his property. The boy followed closely, carrying tools and trying to help. The air felt heavy, as if waiting for something unseen. That was when the strangers arrived. 3 men rode toward the fence, stopping just outside the boundary. Their horses shifted impatiently while the riders looked down at the rancher. The boy sensed danger immediately, even though no one had raised their voice yet. The leader spoke first, his tone sharp but controlled. He said they were offering a chance for the rancher to sell his land before changes came to the valley. He described plans for expansion, larger operations, and new ownership. The rancher listened quietly, never interrupting. When the man finished, the rancher shook his head gently. He said the land was his home and that he had no interest in selling. His voice stayed calm, but it carried strength that surprised the visitors. The men exchanged looks. One of them laughed softly, but there was no humor in it. He warned that refusing could make things difficult. The rancher replied that he had no desire for conflict and only wanted to live peacefully. The boy stood behind his father, watching every movement. He felt fear growing inside him, but he also felt pride in how his father remained steady. As the conversation continued, one of the strangers dismounted and stepped closer than necessary. His presence felt heavy, like a storm approaching. He reached forward slightly, not quite touching but invading the rancher's space. In that moment, something inside the boy changed. Without thinking, he stepped forward from behind his father. His voice came out as a whisper, but it carried surprising firmness. "Don't touch my father," the words hung in the air. Everyone froze, surprised by the small voice breaking the tension. The rancher placed a gentle hand on the boy's shoulder, not to silence him, but to reassure him. The strangers stared for a moment, then one of them smirked as if amused. Yet the boy's courage shifted the mood. The rancher's calm strength combined with the child's loyalty created a quiet barrier stronger than shouting. Hidden beyond the trees, unseen by anyone near the fence, another figure watched carefully. An Apache scout had paused on a nearby ridge, observing the encounter silently. He saw the stranger's posture, the rancher's restraint, and the boy's bravery. Without revealing himself, he turned his horse and disappeared into the fading light. The strangers eventually rode away, leaving behind dust and unease. The rancher exhaled slowly, as if releasing tension he had held for too long. He knelt beside his son and spoke gently, explaining that courage does not always mean fighting. Sometimes it means standing without fear. Night fell over the ranch, but sleep did not come easily. The boy replayed the moment in his mind, wondering if he had done the right thing. His father assured him that speaking from the heart was never wrong when done with respect. Far away, the Apache scout traveled through the darkness toward his people, carrying news that would soon change everything. The ranch rested under a sky filled with stars, unaware that the quiet words of a child had already begun shaping events beyond their sight. The night after the strangers left felt longer than usual. The wind moved across the valley with a low sound, brushing against the wooden walls of the ranch house. Inside, the small oil lamp burned softly. The boy lay awake on his bed, staring at the ceiling. Every small noise made him sit up. He kept remembering the way the stranger had stepped forward, the way his hand had moved too close to his father. In the next room, his father sat at the table, cleaning his tools slowly. He was not afraid, but he was thinking deeply. He understood that the men who had come were not just passing through. They were testing him. They wanted to see if he would bend under pressure. When the boy finally walked into the room, rubbing his eyes, the rancher looked up and gave him a small smile. "You should sleep," the father said gently. The boy hesitated. "Will they come back?" The rancher did not answer right away. He chose his words carefully. "Maybe," he said calmly, "but fear should not decide how we live. We stay steady, we stay honest." The boy nodded, though he still felt a tight feeling in his chest. He sat beside his father, and for a few quiet minutes, they listened to the wind together. Far beyond the ranch, under the same sky, the Apache scout rode through the dark hills. He moved with purpose, but without noise. He had seen many things in his life, but something about the boy's whisper stayed with him. It was not loud or brave in the way warriors are brave. It was small, protective, and full of loyalty. Before sunrise, the scout reached his people's camp. Fires burned low as early risers prepared for the day. The scout went directly to the Apache leader, a man known for wisdom and patience rather than quick action. The leader listened carefully as the scout described the scene at the ranch. He spoke of the stranger's tone, their body language, and the quiet strength of the rancher. Then he spoke about the boy's words. "Don't touch my father," the scout repeated. The leader closed his eyes for a moment. He remembered a harsh winter not many years ago. Food had been scarce, and tensions had been high. During that time, the rancher had allowed Apache families to draw water from his well without complaint. He had traded fairly and spoken respectfully when others would not. The leader turned to the elders gathered nearby. "We owe respect where respect was given," he said slowly. Some of the elders agreed at once. Others were cautious. "It is not our fight," one of them said. "If we step in, we may create more trouble." The leader nodded. He understood their concern. He did not rush to decide. Instead, he ordered scouts to quietly watch the valley. No action yet, only observation. Back at the ranch, morning arrived with a pale light spreading across the land. The rancher and his son stepped outside as they always did. The animals needed feeding. The fences needed checking. Work did not stop because of fear, but something had changed. As they rode toward the edge of the property, they noticed fresh tracks near the road. More than 3 horses had passed during the night. The boy pointed at them silently. The rancher examined the ground carefully. He did not speak, but his jaw tightened slightly. In town, the strangers were already spreading their version of events. They told people that the rancher was blocking progress. They hinted that he had secret alliances. Some townsfolk felt confused. Others began to keep their distance from the rancher, not wanting to be involved in conflict. By afternoon, 2 neighbors rode out to speak with him. Their voices were uneasy. They suggested he reconsider selling before things became worse. The rancher listened respectfully. He thanked them for their concern, but said the same thing he had said before. The land was his home. He would not leave because of pressure. When the neighbors left, the boy asked, "Why are they turning away from us?" The rancher rested a hand on his son's shoulder. Sometimes people follow the loudest voice, he explained. It is easier than standing firm. The boy thought about that for a long time. Meanwhile, Apache scouts watched from distant ridges. They saw more riders visiting the town. They noticed wagons carrying supplies that looked less like farming tools and more like equipment for control. They reported everything back to the leader. By evening, tension in the valley felt heavier than the heat. The rancher sensed that the strangers were gathering support. He did not know what they planned, but he understood that silence would not stop them. That night, as father and son sat by the small fire outside their home, the boy spoke quietly. "Were you afraid yesterday?" he asked. The rancher looked into the flames before answering. "Yes," he said honestly, "but courage is not about having no fear. It is about choosing what is right even when you feel it." The boy nodded slowly. He remembered how his legs had trembled when he stepped forward. He had been afraid, but something stronger had pushed him. High in the hills, the Apache leader made his decision. He had waited long enough. Reports from his scouts confirmed that the strangers were not simply negotiating. They were organizing. They were preparing to force change in the valley. The leader gathered his most trusted warriors. He did not speak of anger, he spoke of balance. "We will not attack," he said firmly. "We will not bring harm, but we will not allow unfair pressure against someone who has shown respect." His words were calm, but they carried weight. Messages spread quietly through the camp. Riders prepared their horses, not for battle, but for presence. Before dawn, the valley was still. The rancher woke earlier than usual. He felt something in the air, a strange quiet like the pause before a storm. He stepped outside and looked toward the horizon. In the distance, faint shapes moved against the rising light. At first, he could not tell who they were. Inside the house, the boy sensed his father's tension and hurried outside. "What is it?" he whispered. The rancher did not answer immediately. He narrowed his eyes, trying to understand what he was seeing. Far away on a high ridge, the first outline of an Apache rider became clear against the sky. And then another, and another. The sun had not fully risen yet, but the valley was no longer empty. The boy felt his heart beat faster. He did not fully understand what was happening, but he knew something important had shifted. The rancher stood very still. He did not feel fear this time. He felt something else, recognition. The small whisper of a child had traveled farther than either of them could have imagined. Before the sun fully rose, the valley held its breath. A thin line of golden light stretched across the horizon, touching the hills one by one. The rancher stood near the fence, his hand resting lightly on the wooden post. His son stood beside him, smaller but steady, trying to see what his father was seeing. At first, the figures on the ridge looked like shadows shaped by the morning light. But as the sky grew brighter, the shapes became clear. Riders sat tall on horseback, still and silent. They were not scattered, they were organized, watching. The boy felt a strange mix of fear and awe. He counted quietly under his breath, but stopped when he realized there were too many to count. The riders stretched across the ridge like a living line. The rancher understood immediately. The Apache had come. He did not smile and he did not wave. He simply stood straight, showing neither panic nor surprise. Deep inside, he felt gratitude, but he also knew this moment was delicate. One wrong move from anyone could turn presence into conflict. Down the road near town, dust began to rise again. The strangers were returning just as he had expected. This time, they did not come quietly in a group of 3. More men rode behind them. They moved with confidence, believing the ranch would stand alone. As they approached the property, one of them noticed movement on the ridge. He slowed his horse slightly, squinting into the light. "What's that?" another man asked. The leader of the group turned in his saddle. When he saw the long line of riders across the hills, his posture stiffened. Within minutes, more Apache riders appeared from different directions. They did not rush. They did not shout. They simply positioned themselves at a distance, forming a wide circle around the valley. By the time the sun lifted fully above the horizon, nearly 400 Apache warriors sat on horseback in complete silence. The boy's eyes widened. He had never seen so many riders together. Their presence felt powerful but not wild. It felt controlled, like a strong river flowing calmly but capable of great force. The strangers stopped near the ranch fence again. The leader tried to laugh, but it sounded forced. "Looks like you made friends," he said sharply to the rancher. The rancher answered calmly. "I made neighbors." The wind moved between them, carrying dust across the ground. No one reached for anything. No one raised their voice, yet the tension was thick. From the ridge, the Apache leader began riding slowly forward. He did not rush. His horse stepped carefully down the slope, and several respected warriors followed at a measured distance. The rest remained in position, forming a silent wall that stretched across the hills. The boy felt his heart pounding in his ears. He looked at his father for reassurance. The rancher placed a steady hand on his shoulder. "Stay beside me," he said quietly. The Apache leader reached the open space between the ranch fence and the strangers. He stopped his horse and looked calmly at the men who had come to pressure the rancher. His expression showed neither anger nor fear. It showed certainty. He spoke in a clear voice that carried across the valley. "This man has shown respect to our people," he said. "We return respect." The words were simple, but their meaning was strong. The strangers shifted in their saddles. They had expected resistance from one rancher, not quiet unity from hundreds. The leader of the outsiders tried to regain control of the situation. "This is none of your concern," he replied. "We are discussing land." The Apache leader did not argue. He simply answered, "Respect for land is always our concern." Silence followed again. Even the animals seemed to sense the importance of the moment. The boy noticed how still everything felt, like the world was listening. Behind the strangers, some of the extra riders began whispering among themselves. They had not signed up for a large confrontation. They had expected an easy show of force, not a valley filled with watchful eyes. The rancher stepped forward slightly, not to challenge anyone but to speak clearly. "I do not seek trouble," he said. "I wish to live and work in peace. I have refused to sell because this is my home." His voice was steady. There was no anger in it. The Apache leader nodded once, showing agreement. The unity between the two men, though they came from different backgrounds, was visible. The outsider leader looked around at the hills again. 400 riders remained silent, their horses calm, their posture disciplined. They were not preparing to charge. They were simply standing as one. The balance of power had changed without a single aggressive move. The boy realized something important in that moment. Strength did not always look loud or chaotic. Sometimes it looked like control. Sometimes it looked like people standing quietly beside each other. The sun climbed higher, lighting the entire valley. The shadows disappeared, revealing the full number of Apache warriors surrounding the ranch from a respectful distance. The sight was overwhelming. The strangers understood the message. They were outnumbered, but more than that, they were outmatched in unity. The outsider leader cleared his throat. "We don't want unnecessary problems," he muttered. "Then do not create them," the Apache leader replied calmly. For several long seconds, no one moved. Finally, the outsider leader turned his horse slightly away from the ranch fence. He signaled to his men. One by one, they began backing away, careful not to show panic but unable to hide their unease. As they retreated down the road, the boy let out a breath he had not realized he was holding. The valley did not erupt into cheers. The Apache warriors did not celebrate. They remained in position until the strangers were far enough away to show that the message had been understood. Only then did the Apache leader turn his horse toward the rancher. The two men looked at each other with quiet understanding. The boy watched closely, knowing he would remember this morning for the rest of his life. 400 riders had not come for conflict. They had come for balance. The valley did not return to normal after the strangers rode away. The air still felt heavy, as if the land itself understood that something important had happened. The sun stood high now, spreading light across the ranch, the hills, and the long line of Apache riders who remained in position. The boy stayed close to his father. He kept looking at the ridge, at the strong figures on horseback. Even though the strangers had retreated, the moment did not feel finished. The rancher knew that too. He stepped forward slowly and removed his hat, holding it respectfully at his side. It was not a dramatic gesture. It was simple, honest acknowledgement. The Apache leader noticed. After a quiet moment, he guided his horse closer to the fence, stopping at a respectful distance. Neither man hurried to speak. They allowed the silence to settle, showing patience. The boy realized that silence could sometimes speak louder than arguments. Finally, the rancher broke it. "I am grateful," he said plainly. "You did not have to come." The Apache leader studied him carefully. His eyes were calm, thoughtful. "You have shared water when it was scarce," the leader replied. "You treated our people with fairness. Respect travels in circles. Today it returned." The words were simple, yet they carried deep meaning. Behind them, the Apache warriors remained steady, forming a wide protective presence across the hills. They did not move forward, and they did not leave. They were waiting not for conflict, but for certainty. The boy looked up at his father. "Will they come back?" he asked quietly, meaning the strangers. The rancher did not answer right away. He looked toward the distant road where the outsiders had disappeared. "They might," he admitted softly. "People who want control do not give up easily." The Apache leader heard this. He turned his gaze toward the road as well. "They will think carefully before returning," he said. "But unity must remain. That is how balance is kept." As the morning passed, word of what happened spread quickly through the town. People who had stayed silent now whispered with surprise. Some felt relief. Others felt embarrassment for having doubted the rancher. By midday, a small group of townsfolk cautiously rode toward the valley. They stopped at a distance, unsure whether they were welcome. When they saw the Apache riders still positioned along the ridges, they hesitated. The rancher noticed them and walked a few steps away from the fence so he could be seen clearly. One of the townsmen called out, "We heard what happened." The rancher nodded but did not boast. "We only stood our ground," he replied. The townsmen shifted uncomfortably. They had believed the strangers when they spoke about progress and growth. Now they saw that the strangers had almost caused a serious divide in the valley. The Apache leader watched quietly. He did not interrupt. This was not his place to lead town matters. He had come only to ensure fairness. One of the townsmen spoke again. "We don't want trouble in the valley. Maybe we listened too quickly." The rancher's voice remained steady. "It is easy to listen to loud promises," he said. "It is harder to wait and see truth." The boy stood beside him, absorbing every word. As the afternoon sun grew warmer, the Apache leader made a small gesture with his hand. Slowly, the riders on the far ridge adjusted their positions, no longer forming a full circle but remaining nearby. The message was clear. They were not occupying the land. They were standing in support. The valley began to breathe again. The rancher invited the Apache leader to share water at the well. It was a quiet symbol of mutual respect. The leader accepted, guiding his horse forward slowly. The boy watched with wide eyes as the two men stood side by side near the well. The rancher drew up a bucket and offered it first. The leader nodded and took a drink, then allowed his horse to drink as well. Small actions can carry great weight. The boy understood that now. In town, the strangers who had tried to force the rancher's hand were facing doubt from their own supporters. Some of their hired riders had already left, uncomfortable with how quickly the situation had turned. Without numbers, without confidence, and without unity, their influence weakened. Back at the ranch, the Apache leader spoke quietly to the rancher. "We will not stay forever," he said. "This is your home, you must stand in it." The rancher nodded. "I will." "But remember," the leader continued, "respect must continue both ways. It does not end with one sunrise." "I understand," the rancher answered. The boy felt something shift inside him again. He had always believed his father was strong. But today he learned that strength could connect across differences. As evening approached, the Apache warriors began preparing to leave. They did not ride away all at once. They moved in groups, disappearing over the hills as quietly as they had arrived. Before turning to go, the Apache leader looked once more at the rancher, and then at the boy. He gave a small nod. The boy felt heat rise to his face. He nodded back, understanding that his whisper the night before had not been forgotten. When the last riders faded into the horizon, the valley felt peaceful again, but not the same as before. It felt wiser. The rancher and his son stood together near the fence. "Was that because of me?" the boy asked softly. The rancher knelt beside him, placing both hands on his shoulders. "It was because of respect," he said gently, "and because you spoke from your heart." The boy thought about that long after the sun began to set. In town, conversations changed. People spoke more carefully. They realized that quick decisions based on fear could divide neighbors. They began questioning the strangers' promises more openly. The ranch remained standing, unchanged in structure but stronger in meaning. As night fell again, the wind moved across the valley just as it had the night before, but this time it carried calm instead of tension. Inside the ranch house, father and son sat near the fire. "Courage is quiet," the rancher said thoughtfully. "It does not need to shout." The boy smiled faintly. Outside, the stars filled the sky, watching over a valley that had chosen unity over division. Morning came slowly after the long and unforgettable day. The valley looked peaceful again, almost as if nothing unusual had happened. The sun rose gently over the hills, and golden light spread across the ranch fields. The wooden fences stood quietly, and the animals moved calmly as they always did. But inside the hearts of the rancher and his son, everything felt different. The boy woke early and stepped outside. The air felt fresh, and the silence was comforting instead of heavy. He looked toward the distant hills where the Apache riders had stood the day before. Now the ridges were empty, yet he felt as if their presence still remained, like a memory carved into the land. His father joined him shortly after, carrying 2 cups of warm tea. They stood together without speaking for a moment, watching the sunrise. "It feels strange," the boy said softly, "like something big happened, but now everything looks normal again." The rancher smiled gently. "Life often continues quietly after important moments," he replied, "but we remember what we learn." They began their daily work, checking the animals and repairing small parts of the fence. Routine helped bring balance back into their lives. As they worked, the boy noticed his father seemed more relaxed than before. The tension that had weighed on him for days had faded. Later that morning, a rider approached from town. The boy recognized him as one of their neighbors. The man stopped near the gate and removed his hat respectfully. "I came to talk," the neighbor said. "People in town have been thinking about what happened." The rancher nodded and invited him closer. The neighbor explained that many townsfolk had started questioning the strangers who had tried to pressure the rancher. Without support, the outsiders had begun leaving the area quietly. Some of their own followers had lost confidence after seeing how the valley stood together. "We should have listened sooner," the neighbor admitted. "We let fear guide us." The rancher did not judge him. "What matters is what we choose now," he said calmly. The boy watched the conversation closely. He saw how honesty could heal tension faster than arguments. As the day continued, more neighbors visited. Some came to offer help with repairs, others simply came to show support. The ranch that once felt isolated now felt connected to the community again. During the afternoon, the boy wandered toward the hill behind the house. He sat on a rock and looked across the wide valley. He remembered the moment when he had whispered, "Don't touch my father." At the time, he had felt small and afraid. Now he understood that even quiet courage could travel far. While he sat there, he noticed movement in the distance. A single rider appeared briefly on the ridge, an Apache scout. The rider paused for only a moment, watching the ranch below, then turned and disappeared over the hill. The boy smiled. It felt like a silent farewell. When he returned to the house, his father was repairing a tool near the porch. The boy sat beside him. "Why did they help us?" the boy asked again, wanting to understand fully. The rancher set down his tools and thought carefully before answering. "Respect builds bridges," he said. "Many people believe strength comes from power alone, but true strength grows from trust. When you treat others with fairness, you plant seeds that grow over time." The boy nodded slowly, letting the words settle. In the following days, the valley returned to its normal rhythm. The strangers did not return. Without support or influence, their plans faded away. The town focused again on farming, trading, and daily life. However, something had changed in the way people spoke to each other. They listened more carefully. They remembered how quickly division could grow when fear replaced understanding. One evening, a group of Apache riders passed near the ranch again, traveling peacefully across the land. The rancher and his son stepped outside to watch. One of the riders raised a hand in greeting, and the rancher returned the gesture. No words were needed. The bond between them was clear. The boy felt proud. He realized that his home was part of a larger world, one where different people could stand together without losing their identity. As weeks passed, the story of that sunrise spread beyond the valley. Travelers carried it to distant towns, telling how unity had prevented conflict without a single act of harm. Some listeners found it hard to believe, but those who had witnessed it knew it was true. One night, as the boy prepared for sleep, he asked his father one final question. "Do you think I was brave?" he asked quietly. The rancher smiled warmly. "Yes," he said, "but bravery is not only about one moment, it is about how you choose to live every day." The boy felt comforted by that answer. Outside, the stars shone brightly over the ranch. The wind moved gently across the fields, carrying the peaceful sounds of night. The rancher stepped outside before going to bed and looked toward the horizon. He felt gratitude, not only for the help they had received, but for the lesson that respect could unite people in powerful ways. When the next sunrise arrived, it felt different from all the others. It symbolized a new chapter, one shaped by understanding rather than fear. The boy stood beside his father as the first light touched the land. He felt stronger, not because he had faced danger, but because he had learned the value of standing up for someone he loved. Life continued, seasons changed, and the ranch remained steady at the edge of the valley. The story of the boy's whisper became a quiet legend, reminding everyone that even the smallest voice can echo across great distances when it carries truth and loyalty.